Hello everyone, welcome to AWS Tutorials. AWS Tutorials provides workshops and exercises which you can use to learn about AWS services. And today we are going to talk about how you can use Amazon services like Lake Formation, Glue, and S3 to create data lake. One of the most fundamental services used in creating the data lake is Lake Formation. So let's get some introduction about that service. So lake formation actually works in conjunction with glue. So glue and lake formation, both capabilities come together to create the data lake. And lake formation is primarily responsible for configuring a data lake in a secure manner. You can use glue and lake formation to be able to collect data from various sources, from various databases, and when you collect the data, you also catalog the data so that data can be used for consumptions by different users. And catalog also provides a way of discovering the data by the end users. In data lake, the data is centrally stored into Amazon S3 bucket, and it is managed over there. Then lake formation provides access control over the data. And when you configure the access control, you could be very specific in terms of which data catalog the user can access, which columns it can access, which operation it can perform, and so on. The data available in data catalog can be used in various ways. People can use this data for various analytics purposes, to process data into some kind of calculative value, which can then be used for reporting, or data can also be used by machine learning algorithms for to build the models using machine learning processes. And again, let me loop back again that lake formation provides all these capabilities by working in conjunction with S3 bucket primarily as a data storage, and with glue, and glue is responsible primarily for running the ETL jobs, data processing jobs, and cataloging of the data. So that's how the data lake is created. And today we are going to create a kind of a mini data catalog, data lake, and you will learn in that process what it needs to be configured to make it working. So let's see what we are going to build today. So what we are going to build today is a small data lake. And the data will be stored into S3 bucket. And then we are going to keep only two set of data here, just to keep it simple and understanding: sales data and customers data. Then and today we are not focusing on the ingestion part, because when you're talking about the ingestion part, there are many things we have to cover, like data coming from IoT devices, data coming from the streaming media, data coming from relational databases, data coming as a file object. So it's a different topic in itself, to be very honest, and I do intend to have a separate session like this, just focusing on the ingestion part, and I promise I will do that. But let's assume that your data is into your S3 bucket, and the two data we are using in this particular example is your sales data and customer data, which you will manually upload. And then once data is there, you use Glue Crawler to crawl the data, so the data is cataloged. And when data is cataloged, it is discoverable by your end users, and it can be used by end users for various conjunctions, be it APIs, be it analytics or reporting, or even machine learning. AWS Lake Formation, along with IAM, provides security to this data. And you can configure access rights for each of the data in the data catalog in terms of who can consume what and what operation the user can perform. And to test that purpose, we will configure some access rights, and then we will set up two users as well, say customer users and sales users, who will then use Amazon Athena as a query tool to query data catalog to test those permissions configured. So this is what we are going to set up today. Okay. So in order to perform this operation or perform this workshop, we have a workshop created at our awsdozo.com website. We will soon navigate to that website, but you can find the link of this website in the description box below. And if you use this link over here, you will be taken through a very detailed set of instructions one by one, which will help you configure the whole data lake. And that will give you a good insight about using AWS services to build data lake and understand their various capabilities and configuration working together. Okay, AWS Dozo comes with many other similar workshops and exercises, and I strongly recommend you should go and explore other workshop and exercises which are of interest to you. But let me take you through the instructions of the workshops and to understand what it will take to build such a data lake. So moving on to the workshops. So this is AWS Dozo, and you can see there are various workshop and exercises into it. But the one which I have opened right now is the exercise which helps create data lake. So I click on this link to start the workshop, and these are different steps you have to perform to complete the workshops. And all you have to do is follow these steps one by one, and end of the workshop, you will have data lake working. So let's start with these steps first. The first step is prerequisite, where basically what you need is an AWS account where you can work and you have local administrative rights on that account, so that you can configure the various resources you need for this workshop. So you must have an AWS account with administrative access rights. If not, you can use this link over here to go and create a new trial account. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. And in this step, we are explaining what different, what we are configuring over here. And some of that part I mentioned here, that we are going to create two data sets over here. One is your customers and sales. So your data lake will have two data catalogs. These are the fields of those data catalogs. Then we are going to create two users, sales and the customers. And the sales user can query all the fields of the sales data set. And customer users can query the customer's data set only, but it can query only two fields. So I've given an example of the permission, but when you will play with it, we understand what other permissions you can do as a part of the configuration. So with this requirement in mind, let's start building the data lake. So first step you do is create the users. So we need to create both users, sales and the customers. So you go to the AWS, you log into AWS, and in this case, we are using the Paris region, but you can use any other region if you want. And we are simply creating a sales and customers user into your IAM console. So we simply added both usernames here. We only need to give the management console access. Then we give a simple fixed password. Because we can simply use it to log in later and test the query of the data. And then we assign certain permissions to this user. And to keep it very simple, guys, we have given kind of full access to S3 bucket or Athena and Glue console and so on and so forth, so that the user can simply navigate to the resources it wants. Okay, but if you're building a solution into production environment, you might want to be more restrictive. You don't want to go give S3 full access, but you might want to give, say, read-only access to certain buckets only where the data is stored. So you can go for that kind of configuration. But we are trying to keep it little simple on this part. Okay, so you created the bucket. Sorry, you created the users. And then you are provided with the URL which you can use to log in as a user. Make note of this URL because you need this logon URL letter to be able to access, to be able to log in as a user and test your access. So once my users are created, we are going to create a role. And as you understand, roles are used in AWS services to make authorized call between them. So for instance, if crawler has to read the data from the S3 bucket and then create a catalog inside a database in Lake Formation, it needs authorization for that. And for that purpose, we are going to create a role which will have the required permissions to be able to read data from the S3 bucket and able to create a catalog inside a database and able to populate it with the schema. So we are going to create a role which then will be assigned to the glue crawler letter to get authorizations to perform such tasks. So what you simply do, you go to IAM console again and you select a glue service as a service for the role, and then for the permissions we are keeping it simple by giving it a power user access role. Now again, if you go for production deployment, you have to be more specific on this part, but I don't want to make the workshop very lengthy by being very specific about specifying inline permissions and so on and so forth. So say, well, let's keep it simple because my focus was to keep more on how the data lake is configured. So we are simply giving power user access to this crawler so that crawler can read data from S3 and write into catalog in the lake formation. So you simply go and create the role, and we give this role a name called Dojo crawler role. So once the crawler is created, now we need to upload data to S3 bucket. So we first go ahead and create an S3 bucket called, say, Dojo data lake. And it might happen that this bucket name is not available when you're doing the workshop. And in that case, you can use a different bucket name and feel free to use that here onwards in your workshop. So you create the bucket, and in that bucket, then you create two folders. One is called data, and one is called script. And data is where we keep the data for the bucket, data for the data lake. And a script is later used by Athena for the query purposes. And I will talk about that later. So let's focus on the data part here. So under the data, you create two more folders called customers and the sales. And then I have provided linked for sample files for sales and the customers.csv. You can simply download these two files and upload customers.csv to customers folders and sales.csv to sales folder. So basically, you're doing a manual data ingestion here. In actual scenario, in actual implementation, I mean, yeah, manual is an option for sure, but people generally go and collect data from IoT devices or streaming media or from relational databases. And in that case, yeah, there are services, there are other services available to automate such thing. But I'm keeping that for some other day because, to be honest, it's a big workshop in itself and needs its own respect and time. But right now we are kind of simulating a data ingestion thing by uploading this data file into the S3 bucket. So our data is into S3 bucket. That means data has been uploaded to the centralized data location. Now we are going to configure the data lake using this bucket. So what we do, we go to AWS Lake Formation. And if you're using AWS Lake Formation for the first time, first thing it says, okay, let's add administrator for the Lake Formation. And it simply uses your logon user. I mean, you can go and configure, not users, but you can go and configure your logon user as an administrator. But if you want to give any other user account as administrative rights, you can do that as well. But in order to configure Lake Formation, you need to have administrative rights. So what we are doing here in workshop is that we're simply adding the logon user as the administrator. And once you have added your logon user as administrator, then what you do is go and create a database. So now you are starting configuration of the data lake. So first you create a database. So we are creating a database called DojoDB and saying this DojoDB is looking for S3 data lake path as this one. And this is the location, guys. Remember, the data folder, it has two subfolders, customers and sales, where we are keeping our data. So we are simply saying, hey, our data is located in this particular folder. And then we simply create the database with that. And once you create the database, you also go and configure the same folder location as data lake location, so that the Lake Formation knows that this is one of the registers location for the data for the data lake. Okay. So this creates the configuration, initial configuration of database, and then once your database is created, so you have data in S3 bucket, you have database created in your Lake Formation. Now you need to catalog that data inside database, so that people can then use this catalog for consumption purposes. So that's what we're going to do next. And for that, we are going to use Crawler. So you can manually create data catalog as well, but that's not what people do, because your data catalog can be as big as 1,000 data catalog across tens of the databases, and it's not really possible to maintain manually. So you use Glue Crawler for that purpose. So we are going to configure a Glue Crawler, but in order for Glue Crawler to work, the crawler needs to be given access to the database, because when the crawler runs, actually it creates a data catalog table inside the database. So that permission has to be granted to the Dojo crawler role, which will actually the crawler will use for the authorization. So what we are going to do is that we are going to database, and then we say, hey, let's grant access to this database, and then we are simply saying give Dojo crawler role both create and alter permissions. So create, because when you're running it first time, you will create a data catalog, and alter because if you're running multiple times and if your source schema changes, then you have to go and change the schema of the catalog as well. So for that, you have to alter the table. But we are not giving any drop permission. That means crawler cannot drop the table. It can only create and alter. So we're simply giving that permission to the database at the database level for the crawler. Now we are going to create the crawler. And crawler is created inside Glue. So we are starting with the crawler configuration, saying, hey, this is my crawler name, Dojo crawler. Then say, what is your data source for the crawler? And say, my data source is S3. And we give the same location where the data, your both sales and customer folders are stored. Okay. And if you remember, this is the data location. This is the data location we configure for the database in the Lake Formation as well. And then say, hey, do you want to add another data store? Because one crawler can crawl data from multiple stores. And say, no, my job is simple, just one data, one location. And then I assign this a particular role, which is Dojo crawler role, you can see here. And then you can go and run it. And you can define the frequency to run. And generally crawlers are scheduled so that crawler automatically look into source data and populate the catalog. But in this case, we are running it on demand, because we are doing the workshop, and we cannot wait for schedule to run. We have to run it once the moment the crawler is ready. So we provide the schedule as run on demand. It says, where do you want to create the output? And output means your data catalog. So we are saying create inside DojoDB, which we created earlier. And then you simply go and run the crawler. So when you run the crawler, actually what happens, it will take some time to finish, especially for the first time. And then what happens that you'll see that it has created two tables inside the database. And if you go to the Lake Formation now and say, hey, I want to see the tables, you can see customers and sales, both tables created in the DojoDB. So these two tables actually represent as a catalog, as a schema for the data stored inside S3 bucket. So keep in mind, the data is still stored inside S3 bucket, but these tables actually present as a schema, as a catalog, as a reference point, you can say, to that data is stored into S3 bucket. And with these two data catalogs, actually, you can, actually, if you click on this, I have told, I'm not showing here, but if you click on this schema, you can see the detailed schema about the data. And you can also make query to these tables over here, which can then query data back from S3 bucket to present back to you. And that's what we are going to do next. So before we do that, we need to set up the user permissions, because remember we said that sales user can access only sales table, and my customers user can access only customers table, but only two particular columns. And that's what we are going to configure next. So we go to the next steps, where we go back to Lake Formation and we select tables one by one. So first we select, for instance, in this case, we are selecting which table? Okay, we select the sales table, and then we are saying on this sales table, I give access only to the sales user and only the select access. And you see, I have not mentioned any columns here. That means it has access to all the tables, or all the columns in the sales table. Similarly, you go ahead and select your customers table, and in that, and for the customers tables, you give access to the customers users. And again, you have given only select access, query access, but you're saying include only two columns, customers names and email. That means customers user can access data from the customers table, but only two columns, not more than that. So you could be really very specific about how do you want your user to access your data. So we have configured the access for both of these users. Now we move on to test the query of the data. So when you test the data, I mean, you can consume data in various ways. You can, as I mentioned earlier, you can use this inside your EMR cluster for big data processing. You can use it inside your Redshift. You can use it inside your reporting tools. You can use it inside your machine learning algorithms. You can use it many ways. But here, what we're trying to see is how does our access permission works. And for that purpose, we are going to use Athena. And Amazon Athena will use to query the data. So you log on to Amazon Athena, okay, and when you log into Amazon Athena is a serverless thing, serverless service, and what happens is that this service you need to this service is used to query data and then your data catalog data, and it needs a location where it can store the temporary results and so on and so forth. And that's why, if you remember, when we're creating an S3 bucket, we created a folder called script, which we are now going to configure over here so that Athena can use that folder location to store any kind of intermediate output when we make query over here. So here we are logging to, we go to Athena. And if you go to Athena, you can see that it shows that, hey, and this time I have logged in as a sales user. So you can see that, okay, so in DozoDB, you can see only sales table. You can't see the customers table. And then what you do, and if you expand it, you can see that all the columns of the sales table. First, you go ahead and set up the script folder as a location to store any kind of temporary things which Athena uses to complete the query. You have to configure for each user, okay, but only one time. And then after that, you simply go and make a SQL query. So it's like similar to SQL query. You go and make a query here, and all you're saying is that this is my table inside my database. Give me all the records from there, and in no time you will see your output in the output box. And you can see here that the person is able to access all the fields from the table because the user account has access to all the fields in the table. Now we are going to logging back as a customer users here, and similar thing. You can, if you go to see, if you go on the left hand side of the on the screen, you will see that you will have a database and then only customers tables, no more sales table. If you expand the customers table, you can see you have only access to two columns because that's how you configure your access, only to two columns. And then when you have done that, you have to configure your location where which S3 bucket Athena can use to store the temporary results. And then you simply make similar query that give me all the data from, or not all data, top 10 data from customers table in the DojoDB. And what happens is that you get back 10 records, but only 2 columns, not all. So this shows you that how your access rights are working for both of the users. Now, with these kind of access rights, whether you access from Athena or from some reporting tool or some other business processing tools or machine learning tool, the same permissions are respected. Okay, so that actually ends the workshop, because you have seen the whole life cycle where your data is created, then your lake formation is created for it's configured for the data lake, then you populated your data catalog, then you provided access rights to your data, and then you tested the access rights. And that's what it takes to complete a data catalog. Data catalog will have more data sources for sure, and they will have much larger number of databases and data tables. But the fundamentals you see here today are the most core of the fundamentals which the data lake uses to configure the big enterprise level data lakes for the customers. Last step, and very important one, is cleanup, because you don't want to incur any cost even after the workshop is over. So we have provided the 6 resources which has to be cleaned up. You will go ahead and remove your crawler, your DojoDB, which will remove your tables as well. You will remove your data lake location, you will remove your S3 bucket where the data was stored, then you will remove the role used by the crawler, and finally both of the users you will remove. So once you remove all these things, your account will pretty much reset to what you had before you started the workshop. Hope you enjoyed the workshop, and it will help you understand some of the fundamentals of building data lake inside Amazon Web Services. If you have any feedback, feel free to provide me in the comment box in our YouTube channel over here, or you can provide similar feedbacks at our AWS Dojo website as well. As I mentioned earlier, AWS Dojo website provides many other similar exercises and workshops which you can use to learn other services, other AWS services. So hope you like them. And if you like this video, please click on the like button, and please subscribe to the channel so that you learn about new content being released on the channel whenever they are. Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.